Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. It's Tuesday, November 15th. This is Africa 54.
Former Kenya President Uhuru Kenyatta went to Goma Tuesday seeking DRC peace as that nation and insurgents continue pitch battles. With World Cup 2022 starting Sunday, we look at one team, Tunisia, and its hopes for success on the pitch. We'll have a report from Tunis. New medical studies show that changing to clean gloves and fresh instruments before sewing up a surgical site lowers the chance of infection. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
Renewed clashes in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo between the army and M23 rebels have sent hundreds fleeing to camps where there's still little food and shelter is flimsy. Meanwhile, East African Community Envoy Uhuru Kenyatta is working to hold a peace dialogue on the region's troubles. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo between the army and M23 rebels has forced hundreds that flee their homes to the village of Kibati, 15 kilometers away from Goma, according to those living in a makeshift camp.
We are here with the children. They do not even have anything to eat. Those who cry, I give them water. I boil water. I give them to drink. There is one who drank lots of water and got diarrhea.
After being dormant for years, the M23 rebels took up arms again in late 2021, claiming that the DRC had failed to honor a pledge to integrate them into the army. The M23 have since won a string of victories against the Congolese military and captured swaths of territory. The East African Community has dispatched an envoy to the region, naming a former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta as the Eastern region's lead facilitator in the peace process.
All groups who currently bear arms should lay those arms down and choose the path of peace through dialogue.
Kenyatta is calling on the warring parties to engage in peace talks because the stakes are high.
Silence the guns and join in a political process. That is to the local groups. To foreign-based groups, it is basically saying that the DRC is no longer the battleground for problems that are not from this country.
M23's resurgence has ramped up diplomatic tensions with the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has accused its neighbor Rwanda of backing the group, a claim Rwanda has repeatedly denied. To counter M23 rebels, the Congolese government is mobilizing its youth nationwide to join the armed struggle, and the military will train them to fight against the rebel group.
The threat of the M23 arriving in Goma worries us because our soldiers are not doing very well. But we are happy to see that these young people leave for training, especially for them to return quickly before the M23 takes Goma. May God protect them.
Authorities say more than 3,000 men and women in North Kivu province have registered to join the army at least in the last 10 days. Kenyan troops last week deployed under the banner of the East African Community arrived in eastern Congo. The troops are part of the 900 Kenyan soldiers who will eventually be sent to eastern Congo, joined by troops from other East African countries. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Climate activists continue to pressure world leaders and climate policy makers at the COP27 Global Climate Conference to do more to save the planet from further effects of global warming. For more on the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, I'm joined live via Skype by Heather Murdoch, VOA's Middle East correspondent. Hello, Heather. Multiple issues discussed on Tuesday, but what really stood out today?
One announcement that came later in the day yesterday that stood out to me was from the World Health Organization. They told us that in 3 years, 2025, they expect half the world's population to live in water-stressed areas. So that's a sobering announcement and speaks to how urgent most of these issues are. Also, a lot of the talk was today about hammering out a deal. There are nearly 200 countries here that have different competing interests and needs, and they have an incredibly thorny issue on the table. How can wealthy countries pay for the suffering of poor countries for climate change disasters that are sure to be coming? This is a really difficult thing to work out in terms of how it is done, who pays what, how it is accountable, and they are trying to work that out by Friday. And there's already talks that the discussions may go on through the weekend as well.
Heather, we've seen multiple groups of people protesting, although the Egyptian government didn't want any protesters anywhere near the summit. But there are other things that people are looking at, and these are, factual things that you probably have also witnessed there. What are some of the climate change impacts that you're seeing in Egypt?
Yes, Egypt itself is suffering from climate change disasters that are seen on a global scale. For instance, the sea levels rising. Egypt's second city, Alexandria, on the north coast, is suffering from rising sea levels. There are already hundreds of people have been displaced, having to move from the coast in recent years, and it is expected by 2050, much of that city might be underwater. That region, the Nile Delta, the Egypt's most rich agricultural area, is also expected to be largely underwater within the next 30 years or so, which could cut their agricultural output to half. And this could be a huge crisis for Egypt, and it's already starting. Already, farmers tell us that they are suffering from cold weather in the winter and at night, and very hot weather in the summer, and it's hurting their plants and their output, and it's increasing poverty. So this cycle of climate change to poverty is happening right here in Egypt and around the globe, and that's exactly what this conference is supposed to address.
Heather, thank you so much. Heather Murdoch is VOA's Middle East correspondent. At the UN Climate Conference, the European Union vows that it will strengthen its carbon-cutting commitment, insisting that the bloc is not backtracking in the face of the war in Ukraine. European Commission Vice President Frans Timmermans denies the bloc is in a dash for gas in response to the invasion of Ukraine by fossil fuel exporter Russia. Campaigners say the EU announcement did not go far enough. Climate activists in Egypt held a demonstration Tuesday calling on Western countries to stop funding new gas projects in Africa. Western nations are seeking to shore up their energy in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine with new gas projects in Africa.
The Russia-Ukraine crisis has caused increased demand for gas in Africa. There is a new project now, Nigerian, you would have heard of the Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project, taking gas from Nigeria through Morocco to Europe. And we are saying we don't want that to happen.
Countries of the global north have been shopping for gas in Africa, using the energy crisis at the moment, the war in Ukraine, and the energy poverty in Africa as a pretext to start doing gas production in Africa. What that means is obviously opening up new gas fields, oil fields, and also putting the entire carbon budget at risk.
Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate is slamming world leaders who persist in backing new fossil fuel projects despite science warnings that this will push temperatures across the planet to dangerous highs. I had an opportunity to speak with Amira Woods, the executive director of the Green Leadership Trust from Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and I began by asking her about the climate divide between developed and developing nations and what's in COP27 for Africa.
This is known as the Africa Cup, hosted by Egypt on behalf of the continent, and it is looking as if, this is Africa's opportunity to set the agenda. Both the leaders, civil society, all are focused on how do we move from words to action, and in particular, action around climate finance. What we know is that Africa is the continent that, in the words of Nimo Bassi, it is a continent that is being cooked. We are already facing the highest impact of the climate crisis. This is not something that's a decade away. It's happening already, and the repercussions are throughout the continent and throughout the diaspora. We have paid the heaviest price of the climate crisis, and yet we know that we did not contribute to this climate catastrophe. It is the developed world in the path they have taken through industrialization that has focused on fossil fuels that has led to this crisis. What's in it for Africa is a chance to say enough is enough. We've got to stop this path that is leading to extinction of the planet. We have to begin to put forward solutions that put the interests of people and the planet first.
Amira, you mentioned rich nations versus the poor nations like the continent of Africa, but also it reminds me of the COP15 in 2009 where rich nations failed to honor the $100 billion pledge in climate financing. Are there legally binding financial commitments this time round to the poorer nations?
Well, Esther, this is the problem. We have gone from a COP that looked at legally binding commitments to one that puts forward pledges, and pledges that are not honored. So what we have are commitments made back in 2015 for $100 billion that have not been honored. And what we see is that the scale of the crisis is escalating, and yet there is still no honoring of these commitments. So what we're calling for at this COP is not only recognizing that loss and damage, that there is very real devastating conditions that people are facing throughout this continent, throughout this world, and issues of reparations from those who are facing the heaviest cost that they did not create, right? Climate reparations, a way to be able to compensate countries that are facing loss, that are facing damage as communities see rising sea levels, see rising temperatures, see the devastating droughts. All of these, in terms of loss and damage, must be front and center when we think about climate finance. So it is making sure the finance is there, but making sure as well that it isn't saddling the global south with more debt.
Amira, you've been at the forefront of fighting for the environment. And I'm just wondering, when you listen to the African leaders at COP27, what do you see as their strategy to deal with the effects of climate change that we're witnessing on the continent?
I think the strategy of the leaders, both the governments and the civil society delegations that are here, is to elevate the voices of the people who are at the forefront of the climate chaos, to make sure that those who are in the Congo Basin, in the rainforest, that are facing, extinction now, that their voices, their solutions are elevated. This is how we understand that people are already finding ways forward. We are incredibly resilient people, and the solutions are there.
That was Amira Woods, the executive director of the Green Leadership Trust. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is vowing to implement honestly a ceasefire agreement between his government and forces in Tigray, which he says is necessary to ensure a lasting peace. The truce signed on November 2nd agreed to end 2 years of war that has devastated the Tigray region, killing thousands, displacing millions, and threatening the unity of Africa's second most populous nation. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry is urging African leaders to keep their citizens from being embroiled in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This news comes just one day after Zambia said one of its own was killed. Zambian Foreign Minister Stanley Kakubo says a Zambian student who had been jailed in Russia died fighting in Ukraine. Kakubo is demanding an explanation from the Kremlin. Russia says it is investigating the claim. Leaders of the G20, a group of the world's largest economies, begin talks Tuesday in Indonesia, overshadowed by divisions caused by the war in Ukraine. A senior U.S. administration official says the leaders are set to issue a statement in which most members will strongly condemn Russia's war against Ukraine. In opening remarks before leaders began closed-door discussion, G20 host Indonesian President Joko Widodo pleaded with members to not allow divisions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine to derail their agenda for unity and economic recovery.
Paradigm of collaboration is badly needed to save the world. We all have responsibility, not only for our people, but also for the people of the world. Being responsible means respecting international laws and principles of the UN Charter consistently. Being responsible means creating not zero-sum situations. Being responsible here also means that we must end the war. If the war does not end, it will be difficult for the world to move forward.
At the UN, our diplomats worked with partners for a long time to agree and to adopt two very important resolutions. The first of them is supported today, on the establishment of an international compensation mechanism that will allow to compensate for all the damage caused by the Russian war, and at the expense of Russian assets. Reparations that Russia will have to pay for what it has done are now part of the international legal reality.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky repeatedly used the term G19 to exclude Russia and called for an international conference to prevent more Russian aggression. During an exclusive interview with ABC News, former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence says he was angered by Donald Trump's words on January 6th. The interview was released on Monday, a day before the former president is expected to announce his plans to run in 2024. Pence said, in part, quote, "The president's words were reckless. It was clear he decided to be part of the problem," unquote. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, researchers find that routinely changing gloves and instruments before closing wounds reduces surgical site infection. But first, Haiti Adams tells us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll discuss the UN climate conference underway in Egypt. Global leaders attending COP27 are exploring ways to tackle climate change. Are advanced economies at fault? And what is owed to countries and communities bearing the brunt of the climate crisis? Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, analysts say the attendance of African Union Chair Macky Sall at the ongoing G20 summit is an indication of the significant role of Africa in global geopolitics, a shift from the age-old rhetoric. An Algerian court on Tuesday handed a 15-year prison sentence to Abdelmoumen Ould Kaddour, the former head of state energy giant Sonatrach, in a corruption scandal involving an Italian refinery. A Nigerian court in Port Harcourt arraigned 16 foreign crew from an oil tanker, Heroic Idun. Officials accused them of suspected maritime offenses involving attempts to illegally export crude. Hundreds of Tunisian fans in Qatar gathered to welcome players from their national team as they arrived in Doha ahead of the World Cup.
The Tunisian football team entered the last preparatory camp for the World Cup in Dammam, Saudi Arabia. The training will continue until the 13th of the same month, when the team will switch to Qatar on November 14th and hold the last preparatory friendly match against Iran on the 16th of the same month.
Our target is to go as far as we can and make Tunisians happy.
It's the second World Cup in a row for me. We should keep and work on the good things we did in Russia, World Cup 2018. Our target is to qualify to the second round.
Tunisia plays in Group D of the first round of the 2022 World Cup, along with France, Denmark and Australia. The Carthage Eagles will play against the Danish national team on November 22nd, 2022, before they meet the Australian team on the 26th of the same month and the 2018 world champion, France, on the 30th of November.
I want to tell Tunisians that we share the same hopes and dreams. We trust the group and we can do what makes Tunisians happy.
I hope everyone stands by outside and supports the national team in the World Cup and forget the negative points.
The Tunisian football national team's preparation and training in Tunisia is over, but it's not over yet. The team will land in Saudi Arabia for a week before going to Qatar to participate in the World Cup FIFA 2022 for the 6th time. Amir Buka, Voice of America, Tunis.
It's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with the latest on safe surgery. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. A new study published in medical journal The Lancet, researchers found that routinely changing gloves and instruments just before closing wounds could significantly reduce surgical site infection, the world's most common post-operative complication. They say patients in low and middle-income countries are disproportionately affected by wound infections. Following a trial of the procedure in Benin, Ghana, India, Mexico, Nigeria, Rwanda, and South Africa, the researchers found that a routine switch of gloves and instruments during abdominal wound closures could prevent as many as 1 in 8 cases of surgical site infection. The Foundation for Special Surgery aims to provide highly complex surgical care in communities worldwide where the need is great, but the expertise is lacking. The foundation has worked in countries like Peru, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Cameroon. For more insight, I am joined by Pamela Shofola, Director of Development for the Foundation for Special Surgery. Pamela, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonard.
So access to safe surgery is a challenge on Africa. In Africa, we see it in reports. So it is being addressed by the Foundation for Special Surgery. First of all, how much of a problem is it? What is really being experienced by people on the ground?
Yes. The Foundation, what we're finding is there's lack of capacity, there's lack of infrastructure, there's lack of expertise because there's lack of infrastructure. We can't train the people with the correct equipment. And then also we're dealing with the state-of-the-art equipment, as I was saying. So basically it is lack of capacity, lack of expertise, and state-of-art equipment.
So when we look at some of the most pressing needs, for example, when you think about people in the rural area, if in the cities you talking about these issues, what about access for these people in the rural area?
Exactly, it's really hard, but Foundation for Special Surgery, we have been going to countries now for over 15 years, and we are providing healthcare to people that come from the villages. They come to the city, and we give them the exact care that we actually give here in America. So we have really specialized surgeons. We deal with children that have cleft palates, children that have deformities because of cancer. You know, here, if you have a little spot that grows on your cheek, for example, you get it taken care of right away. But in Africa, that tumor can really grow. And so, you know, we just want to provide the kind of healthcare that we provide here in America as well as in Africa.
That's a big challenge because it's such an advanced medical system here, right?
Right.
So what does it take? What kind of impact have you seen through your work?
Yes, so like I said, we have been going for about 15 years now, back and forth, right? Training the surgeons on the ground. But we have realized we cannot just be going in and out. We need to build capacity on the ground. And how are we doing that? We're actually building a hospital in Ghana. We're just so excited. The last time I was here, I think 2018, I told you that our plans were to build a hospital. Well, we broke ground last year, April 24th, and I am pleased to say that the building is almost 95% complete. And we're hoping to open up in first quarter of next year.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So how will people have access to this hospital? What should they look forward to in this state-of-the-art facility?
Well, they will have, like I said, direct access to the hospital. We're going to be giving free surgery as well as paying. We're still going to do pro bono services, but also there will be paid services as well. But the key is that it is going to be a state-of-the-art facility, a 40-bed hospital, and I'm talking about 40-bed private rooms. Usually in Africa you have a huge ward. This is going to be private rooms, and the care that they will get is the kind of care that they get here. You know, we'll have doctors from institutions here, from Hopkins, from Harvard, training people on the ground so that they can in turn train the next generation of young surgeons.
That's amazing, because then people will not have to travel.
They will not have to travel. You can imagine what happened during the pandemic. People that normally could travel out, they could not travel out. They had to stay in the country, and guess what? Healthcare, where was the healthcare? So a lot of people died.
That's true. And something I want to touch on before we wrap is your gala. You have an annual gala.
Yes, we have a gala
where
coming up this Saturday.
Actually, that was a platform to help build the hospital.
So
very quickly, what's on?
Yes, so we have the gala this Saturday at the Mayflower Hotel. It's at 6 o'clock, and we're going to be showcasing some of the lives that we have touched and saved. They're going to be stories of people that, you know, they're here to tell their story. And then also we are going to showcase the hospital, and of course we're fundraising to now equip the hospital, because the building, like I said, is about 95% done, and we're raising funds now to get equipment in the hospital.
Well, that's very exciting. I was able to see some of the work, and I see those surgeries. I mean, one woman that didn't have a face.
She did not have a
face.
So
we have to leave it there. So good luck and all the best with the gala, Pamela. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Pamela Shofola is the Director of Development for the Foundation for Special Surgery. Esther, back to you.
And thank you, Leno. That's our show for today. Have a good night.